Shivaji Pratim Basu, Dean, Faculties of Arts and Commerce, Department of Political Science, Vidyasagar University, Midnapur. Sir, are you here, sir? Professor Shivaji Pratim Basu, Dean, Faculties of Arts and Commerce, Department of Political Science, Vidyasagar University, Midnapur. Sir,
Yes, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes. Before that, sir, I want to say two lines for you, sir. Sir, actually, this is it's a very difficult to say all those things about the sir about Shivaji Pratim Basu, but I want to say something that he's not only a dean, faculties of arts and commerce. Professor Basu is a recipient of the Shikha Ratna award given by the Department of Higher Education, Government of West Bengal. His research interests include popular movements, sustainable rights, forced migration and displacement, media studies, and cultural politics. He is the author of Globalization, A Right to Information in 2011, and the poet and the Mahatma engagement with nationalism and internationalism in the year 2009. And he edited volumes include Forced Migration and Media Mirrors 2014 and The Feeling of People of South Asia, Selection from Refugee Watch in 2009. He is a member of learned societies such as West Bengal Mohammedan Calcutta Research Group, West Bengal Political Science Association, Association for Studies in Society and Social Change, and Institute of Development Studies in Kolkata. Thank you, sir, for being with me. Thank you. Stage is yours, sir.
Thank you, Shukanto, Dr. Shukanto Ghosh. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for organizing such an important webinar, an international webinar on such an important issue, especially in pandemic times. We are discussing many things, but this is also a time to look back on what is happening on the front of democracy, especially in Asia and especially in South Asia. I'll not waste much time, and without much ado, I will propose my. I would propose a little sketchy, rather, evolution of Indian democracy since its inception to the present time. It will not be. It has some analytical parts, yeah, and if discussions arise, then I may address some of the issues. But otherwise, it is mainly meant for, and it's good to see some of my research students are also have joined as participants in this webinar. Well, without much ado, I will go straight to my presentation, and because the time is very short, and within this small time, within this limited time schedule, I propose to browse through the different phases of Indian democracy since inception, and draw a kind of a conclusion or show you something. So I have prepared. I have prepared. A PPT PowerPoint presentation for you, which may help us to restrict ourselves to a given time, to remain in the limits of the time, and also it may help some of the students to understand the things better. So I will just go to this. Yes. Shukanto, hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I should go through this present now and then your entire screen or a window?
No problem, sir. No problem, sir.
Now, which one should I press? Your entire screen, no?
Okay, yes, sir. It's entire screens.
But it's not coming. Can you see it?
No, sir. No, sir. Zaman, Sanjoy is here.
But I think organizer can help you. No? This.
Yeah.
I request some of
Yes, Sanjay is there.
Yeah.
Sir, Sanjoy will help you, sir.
কিভাবে পুরো স্ক্রিনটা জুড়ে ওটা
in the background I have kept my PowerPoint presentation in the background. So this is the screen, and I am going to present now. I have clicked it, and there are three options. That is your entire screen, a window. Which one should I press? Unta clipboard. Which one?
First one, sir.
Your entire screen?
Yeah.
But it is only sharing my screen.
Then we should minimize this current screen. Hello.
স্যার বর্তমানে যে স্ক্রিনটা আছে ওটা মিনিমাইজ করতে বলছে।
Hello.
হ্যাঁ সঞ্জয়, তুমি বাংলাতে বলো সঞ্জয়।
your interest স্ক্রিন করে নিয়ে তারপরে আপনার যে ব্রাউজারটাকে মিনিমাইজ করে দেন, তাহলে অটোমেটিক্যালি চলে আসবে।
সঞ্জয় আবার একটু বলো স্যারকে।
এবার এসছে?
না আসেনি একবার স্যার।
এটা তো হয় না কখনো। ও শেয়ার টিপতে হবে, শেয়ার টিপতে অপশন নেই।
আপনি স্যার ওটার উপরে আপনি ক্লিক করতে হবে, ওটার উপরে কখনো।
তার উপরে
আপনি এন্টার ফুল স্ক্রিন দিয়েছেন তো, তারপর ওটা যখন ওই উইন্ডোটা খুললো, উইন্ডোটার উপর আপনি ক্লিক করতে হবে। আপনি ক্লিক করলে সেটা শেয়ার হবে, তারপর আপনি মিনিমাইজ করবেন।
Thank you.
So this is yes. Thank you so much. I'm very sorry for wasting your time and mine also. Should I continue in English or you want something in Bengali? Because I am comfortable at two languages. I know two languages. Are all the are there any outside participants from outside West Bengal and outside India? Is there
Yes,
any
sir.
part?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. There are
Okay. So naturally, we should stick to English. So democracy in India. This is a very broad title. When Dr. Ghosh Shukanto, he was very persistent in nature. He's a sweet boy who was very persisting in nature and went on saying, "Sir, please give us some time." And it's on democracy, the state of democracy in Asia. So I thought, why not democracy in India? So democracy in India, but I will browse some slides. The first part is basically theoretical part. That basically talks about the theories of democracy and about democracy. What is democracy? As you all know, but I will repeat it. Please forgive me for some minutes, and then I will go straight to my topic, that is democracy in India. So there are different connotations of democracy. We all say about democracy, and you all know that this word democracy, etymologically it combines two words, demos and kratos. Of government, a classification of governments, that is the Greek governments, that is the polis. The Greek city-states were known as polis, and there are many kinds of rules available at that point of time. And as a system and politics, and in politics, he equated democracy with anarchy, something undisciplined, act of a rule of undisciplined mob, and treated it as a corrupt form, or not the ideal, but the perverted form of an ideal system called polity. You all know this. And I'm going straight to now Aristotle's classification of governments. Here is on your left, the classification is given. As you all know, Aristotle's typology. It is based on three things: number of rulers, ideal, and the perverted forms. So one rule, when the ruler is one, the ideal form is monarchy, as you all know, and then that tyranny, then perverted form. When it's a rule of few, the ideal form is aristocracy, another is oligarchy, that is the perverted form. And in case of many, where many people are ruling, its polity is the ideal and democracy is the perverted form. So Aristotle did not accept democracy. He was fearful about democracy. It's like, you know, when you catch a pickpocket in a bus and the mob coming from any side, people from any side, you don't know them, they're anomic people. This it's a rule of the anomic people. You don't know, and it's a kind of, you know, that kind of street justice kind of thing. That the thief or the pickpocket or any gunda is given immediately. It is a very summary justice kind of thing. Pitiye dao, mere dao. So that kind of thing. That is a kind of Aristotle always was fearful about this kind of democracy. So he, by demos, he was fearful about this demos, which according to him was very, you know, it is faceless, it is undisciplined, and you know, this is very anarchic also according to him. And Aristotle got this kind of the idea of these typologies, the idea of this monarchy, aristocracy, as you all know, he took it from Plato's Statesman. Now, different connotations, as you know, connotations are different. So following classical Greek thinkers, the Romans were very, you know, they highlighted, they upheld the spirit of law. You know, Romans thought about law. The Greek, they thought about the ideals. The Romans thought about the law. So they wanted, well, they accepted the Greco philosophy of democracy in a sense, but what they wanted, what they tried to build up, you know, institutions, legal institutions. They wanted to institutionalize the whole system of democracy by building two institutions called Senate and then the assemblies. Senate for the aristocrats and assemblies, that is for the common citizens. Now, today also we find this this distinction. Senate means the upper house. That is the rule. That is the house of the chosen few, and the assemblies or our Lok Sabha, that is the place for the common representatives. You know, this Greco-Roman thought, they have influenced you know, generations and generations of the European thought, Western thought, and also the modern political thought. On the other hand, in India, what happened? In India, you have heard about Ganas, Gan, in Sanskrit this is Gana or Sangha. Those, there were Gana Rashtras, Gana Rajyas. So Gana Rajya, in today's world also, Republic is known as Gana Rajya. Gana Rajya in the Hindi or the Devanagari, in the Hindi version or the Sanskrit version of Republic is Gana Rajya. So the Ganas and the Sanghas were there, and the Sabhas and Samitis were also there, the forms of the assemblies. Now, I want to place before you my position that commonly it is spoken that it is accepted that as if democracy and violence, they do not go together. But in my view, democracy and violence, they have very reciprocal relations with one another. In many times in history, we have seen that it is violence which paves the way of democracy. For example, how the idea of democracy came to Europe, and from Europe it spread all over the world. In French Revolution, what happened? First came violence. So without violence, the concept of democracy and violence, they have very concomitant relations, if I may say. So contrary to the liberal idea that democracy or democratic change happens peacefully, only peacefully, all the Western revolutions that paved the way of democracy in Europe and America have been very violent. You have the example of French Revolution. Then you have the picture of this. These are the artistic representations of the Glorious Revolution. And then you have the picture of the American Revolution. It's the American Revolution of 1776. So everywhere where democracy came, it came through violence. So that is my theory. So now I am coming about modern democracies. So what I meant to say that democracy don't get frustrated if you see sometimes violence in democracy, and don't think that violence is antithetical to democracy. Sometimes, not all kinds of violence, I would say, but certain kinds of violence also promotes, it paves the way of democracy. So there are many forms of democracy. Now I'm coming to the forms of democracy. In liberal system, there are many kinds of democracy. I can tell you about more than, in fact, on this topic I can speak for hours and hours, but I will limit my discussion within 20-25 minutes. So there are, as you can see on your screen, this is liberal democracy. I have mentioned socialist or Marxist democracy. I have mentioned populist democracy. What we are seeing nowadays, populist democracy or direct democracy. And I have just examined one PhD paper from JNU very recently. It's on digital democracy. So digital democracy, or it's a matter of the citizenry. The citizenry, the netizens, tells about the netizens who are very net savvy, very WhatsApp, Twitter savvy. That kind of democracy is also there. So liberal democracy, what we find mostly, the system, the forms of government are either parliamentary or presidential or mixed. And party system wise, it is either bi-party or multi-party. And the structure of government may be unitary, maybe federal. And the socialist, by socialist, I mean the Marxist, the form is dictatorship of the proletariat. Party system is one party system, and then inner party democracy. At least the critics say there is no democracy, but the Marxists talk about the inner party democracy through democratic centralism and populist democracy. This variant we see mainly in recent times in many states, many countries, many states, and even in India in some states. So it highlights the importance of common people's interest against the elite, and it is generally led by one charismatic leader, one or two, mainly one charismatic leader. In India also, you'll find so many examples of populist leaders. And then the question of direct democracy is also there. The anarchists, the radicals, the postmoderns, they stand for engaging people at the decision-making level, at the very micro level, and at various dimensions and at very micro levels. Now I am coming straight to my topic. That is democracy in India. When Shukanto asked me to, please give us a name. So I readily said democracy in India. But when I wrote it down, when I prepared this PowerPoint presentation, I thought the name should be, more apt name should have been Evolution of Parliamentary Party-Based Democracy in India. So as we all know, we find all the important characteristics, varieties of liberal democracy in India, what we have talked about just now. And structure-wise, India is very federal or quasi-federal, according to Casey Ware, as you know. And government-wise, it is based on the principle of diarchy. Diarchy, two sets of power. It follows from the British principle of crown, the dignified, and the to quote Bejerhard, it is on the dignified representing the crown, and the efficient represented by the prime minister. So that kind of things we are following here. Both the president and the prime minister, the governor and the chief minister, etc., as you all know. And legislative wise, it is parliamentary, bicameral at the center and in some states, and monocameral in most of the states. And party wise, it is multi-party. And so I will, as I have already told you, I will go through this parliamentary party-based democracy. So this is the first phase and the part one. As you all know, the new constitution of 1950, it gave us means the citizens of India, the voting right. One man, one vote. This is called universal adult franchise. And it was given to a society members where belong to caste, class, community, ethnicity, was a very, very diverse society. Very diverse society. If you are situated in North Bengal, you are situated in Coach Bihar and Birpara, you know, the people of Calcutta, they know less. The people of South Bengal, they know less, but the people of North Bengal, especially the hill people and where you are situated, you know about, and the people of India's northeast, they know about, you know, how ethnically divided we are, which had and still has, and also this society has some remnants of feudal culture, which by nature is anti-democratic. This is anti-democratic. You know, till today we call Jyotiraditya Scindia a prince, or Madhavrao Scindia a prince, or Gayatri Devi Rajmata. So these kind of things are there, or dynasty. So this also gives rise to a new characterization to identify of a family like the Gandhi Nehru family as a dynasty. So that kind of things. This is very anti-democratic, but this goes on in India in the name of democracy. And under British rule, Indians had very limited, as you know, voting rights. Everyone could not vote. There was no possibility. You know, only it was based on it was based on property and education. The voting rights were based on, and there was no, unlike the West, in England and in other countries, there were, you know, strong movements, and you know, where people have been killed also. It had been killed in those movements. Called they were called the suffragettes. So there was no movement for universal suffrage. Thus, the Indians had a very limited training and experience about the importance of becoming electors overnight by a stroke of the constitution. So whatever aberration we see, sir, vote dite giye paisha niye vote dicche, or whatever we see the allegations, we know what is going on. So because we have no training, we have no experience, we have not fought for it, we were given suddenly we became Indian citizen and free Indian citizen, and we were given a voting right. Anyway, next one. Party-wise, so now I'm coming to parties. Party-wise, Congress was the most advantageous position in relation to other parties. In the initial period, it has to be the most important party. Why? because since it is the oldest party organization, it was political organization, it was founded in 1885, as you know. And owing to its platform-like character, you know, Congress was less a party than a platform in those days. And it represented multi-language communities, ideologies, etc., and caste, class, etc. So, different group interests and ideologies have been accommodated in it. And thirdly, it had prior experience. Congress had run, you know, governments during the British rule also, although very partial, right, with very partial power was given to that. And also, and before the first general elections, it was Congress. The Congress leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, he was the prime minister. Then Vallabhbhai Patel was there. So it was almost with some exceptions like B.R. Ambedkar also was there. Initially, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was there. So it was a kind of an you know, national government, but it was led by the Congress. So Congress had the experience or the claim. It had the claim, yes, we have led Indian national struggle. So Congress was in the most advantageous position, and all these factors led to what Rajni Kothari later described as the Congress system. So something was built as the Congress system, where what we found is one party dominant multi-party system. Party-wise, it was one party dominant system, where other parties were there, but they were insignificant parties. Now, evolution of this is the first phase, number 3. This Congress system, the Congress system started under Nehru, and Nehru died in 1964. And after that, for a big period, Shastriji came, Lal Bahadur Shastriji came. And Nehru was the chief architect of modern Indian state and institutions. In fact, all the modern institutions you are seeing, like Planning Commission, which is not now here. It was replaced by Niti Aayog, but you know, it undertook a very important role in building modern India. Then IITs, IIMs, Election Commission, everything, it was made by Jawaharlal Nehru and his team. But this system began to backfire first under his daughter Indira Gandhi in the 4th general elections, 1967. When the Congress lost in 9 Indian states against different combines of regional and national opposition parties. Many new governments came in various states like, you know, UP, in West Bengal, in Bihar, and in other states. So change came first in 1967 when Congress began to lose its hold over the states. It also signified the end of the Nehruvian democratic practices in the Congress and ensured the emergence of Indira Gandhi as the supreme leader in the majority group of the party. Party was split within 2-3 years. Around the issue of V.V. Giri's election, the party was split. Around the issue of bank nationalization, coal nationalization, all the things which are being now denationalized by Narendra Modi government, had been nationalized under Indira Gandhi. And Indira Gandhi and the party was split between 2 groups. One group is popularly known as Congress. It was actually Congress Requisitionists or Congress R, but actually popularly it was known as Congress New, Novo Congress in Bengali, and also Congress Organization, Congress O, with the old party heads. The beginning of 1970s saw the emergence of a new Indira Gandhi, confident with bank and coal nationalization, dissolution of PV parts, and leading the Bangladesh war. Most importantly, the Bangladesh war against Pakistan. She personified an unprecedented power in party and the government, both in the party and the government. Previously, Jawaharlal Nehru led government. And the party presidents were very important. Party presidents were very important in Nehru's time, and these two were separated. Were separate. But now, party and government, they became almost unified under Mrs. Gandhi, and she personified an unprecedented power in party and government. And critics saw the trends of growing authoritarianism in her style and functioning. The symbols of centralization, like Congress High Command, as you know, this is very popular term. Congress High Command is there, still there. It is there. It emerged at that time. Earlier, during Nehru's time, there was nothing called Congress High Command. It was only AICC or the Central Committee, etc. Or the very word dynasty became popular during this time. The 19-month national emergency, which happened between 1975 and 1977, marked the first great divide in Indian democracy. So you can, in Indian democracy, you can draw a line, the emergency, the before emergency and post-emergency. In the post-emergency situation, Indian politics was divided between Indira Gandhi versus the rest. On one hand, there was Indira Gandhi and all the others on the other hand. The defeat of Congress under Mrs. Gandhi marked the end of 3 decades, 1947 to 1977, rule of Congress at the same time. 30 years rule at a stretch ended in 1977, and came this man, Morarji Bhai Desai, as the first non-Congress government Prime Minister, who was in fact morally supported by Jayaprakash Narayan, who launched a very intense students' movements in Bihar, Gujarat, and Chhatra Sangharsh Samiti, where these 3 important men of Bihar now, Lalu Prasad Yadav, Sushil Modi, and the present Chief Minister, they were all involved, Nitish Kumar involved in this. The Janata Party government under Morarji Desai came to power in 1977, tiding the anti-emergency wave with an amalgamation of 4 opposition parties inspired by Jayaprakash Narayan. The Bharatiya Janata Party, the Bharatiya Jana Sangh, the previous incarnation of today's BJP, was also one of the constituents. So BJP first got the taste of central power in 1977. 2 ministers of BJP from Bharatiya Jana Sangh were in the Morarji Bhai cabinet. They were Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he was the foreign minister, and L.K. Advani, who was the information and broadcasting minister. But the Janata Party could never come up as a proper party. The constituent parties retained their unofficial identities and sought to cater diverse interests. As a result, it crumbled within 2.5 years, and Indira Gandhi again came back to power in the beginning of 1980s. Here comes 80s, the 80s, great 80s, the rule of the mother and the son. The second innings of Indira Gandhi was not very easy. Opposition parties, which became very stronger at the state levels, they remained stronger. Left Front became stronger, and other parties like Telugu Desam Party and other party governments were there, here and there. And during the brief Janata rule, mostly retained their power. Diverse interests, and erstwhile, Congress represented all the diverse interests. Babu Jagjeevan Ram was the leader. Babu Jagjeevan Ram was the leader of a section of the people of Bihar. For the community now, you find Ram Vilas Paswan. So he had another party. He has his own party. But early erstwhile, Jagjeevan Ram was part of Congress. So all the diverse interests were represented by the Congress. Now they were being dispersed. They were being dispersed one after another in the second phase of Indira Gandhi. And in some cases, Punjab regional aspirations combined with religious support went out of hand. Punjab went for, terrorism, and which, as a result, which killed Mrs. Gandhi in 1984, 31st October 1984, she was killed. Rajiv Gandhi, Indira's son, now became the prime minister with an unprecedented victory, 4/5 majority, with 4/5 majority in Lok Sabha he came. And he signed many accords to quell the regional discontents, like he, signed the Assam Accord, wherein this, this issue of NRC is there. However, even with a huge majority, he could not hold the diverse, Congress could not hold the diverse interests and demands. And serious charges of corruption also marred the last years. And finally, in 1989, he went out of power. And here begins the third phase of Indian democracy. Coalition politics became the key word of Indian democracy since 1990s, and VP Singh, the new prime minister of the National Front, ran his government with many caste and region-based parties, with the outside support from the left and the BJP. All the caste parties, as you see, all were the members of the National Front. And the BJP began to launch Ram Mandir movement to come to claim the support of all Hindus. And that also began at that time, the Ram Shila movement, where the making of bricks in the name of Jai Sri Ram was done, were done at that time. And to check this tiding wave of Hindutva, Singh implemented the recommendations of Mandal Commission, which spearheaded the caste politics, especially in Bihar, UP, as never before. Soon, the days of old Congress and the holistic parties, the days of Congress was over. The days of the holistic parties were over. And all the caste parties, the party like RJD, then SP, then BSPs, all came into being. And to counter this, the BJP president Advani, LK Advani, he undertook a massive Rath Yatra throughout India. And his party withdrew support from National Front government after his arrest in Bihar by Lalu Prasad Yadav. And the Singh government, VP Singh government, fell within a year. Now comes this phase, 2nd December 1992. And you have seen the development, later development. So now the BJP have become a volatile force, even in the Congress rule of Narasimha Rao. After the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, Congress again gained some seats and came to power, but without a full majority. The Rao government was a minority government which faced some crises, including the demolition of Babri Masjid on 2nd December 1992. But even with this minority government, it continued up to 1996. The demolition of Babri Mosque to construct Ram Temple signified the second great divide in Indian politics. Earlier, it was emergency that divided Indian politics. And now, the demolition of Babri Mosque in the name of Ram, constructing Ram Temple, that became the dividing line. Now, what had been a divide between Congress versus the rest, now it became a fight between BJP versus the rest. And the era of coalition entered a new phase after quick dismissal of two anti-BJP United Front governments under Deve Gowda and I.K. Gujral, The BJP under Atal Bihari Vajpayee came to power in 1998, forming the National Democratic Front. So first, BJP is making a front again. It is a major party-led front. It is unlike the Janata Party or the National Front or the United Front. It is a party-led front. The main party, it's like the left front led by CPIM. It is a BJP-led front, namely National Democratic Front. It came into being, while many non-BJP parties under the leadership of Congress also led a front called United Progressive Alliance, of the UPA. With this, Indian politics entered the phase of bipolar alliance. Now, the NDA under Vajpayee rule, it ruled for more than 6 years, from 1998 to 99, then came Kargil War, and then from 1999 to 2004. Under UPA, so it's a new era began, the era of bipolar alliances, not biparty system, but bipolar alliance system, we can call it. The UPA under Manmohan Singh also ruled for 10 years. In the first phase, with the outside support from the left, as you know, the left withdrew support. In the second phase, without them. And these two governments were based on the bipolar alliance politics in Indian democracy. And now this is the fourth phase, and till now this is the last phase. This is the fourth phase of Indian democracy, if we accept the categories that I have offered. The Indian democracy seems to have completed a Hegelian circle. You know, G.W.F. Hegel he always talked about circles of reason. So it is also as if we have completed a circle. We have gone back to the, you know, we have just traveled a circular route of 360 degree. The Indian democracy seems to have completed a Hegelian circle with the coming of Narendra Modi as a new Prime Minister of NDA government in 2014. Although theoretically it is still a coalition government, NDA is still a coalition government, but it is led by the BJP, which alone possessed and still possesses the absolute majority in the two terms. 2014 to 19, it was absolute, and 2019, it is more than absolute. And the way that Modi runs the government, and he takes decisions, and allegedly uses investigating machineries to control opponents, and on the other hand, charms the masses as an orator, have some resemblances with the late Mrs. Gandhi, according to many commentators, according to some commentators. They say we can compare Modi with Mrs. Gandhi, only with Mrs. Gandhi. The way the present ruling party tries tooth and nail to topple opposition ruled states, and with the present pitiable desired status of the opposition parties, including the Congress, are we back to the old days of one-party dominant multi-party system again? So that is the question. So according to me, we have traveled. We have given around. We have completed this circle. We have started with one-party dominant multi-party system, and again today, traveling through all the phases, we have again reached. Have we reached? That is the question. One-party dominant multi-party system. But even we accept Hegel, we must also remember Marx, who said in his 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte that somewhere Hegel said that history repeats, but he forgot to say that even if it repeats as sometime, the first time as a, the first time is a tragedy, the second time, the second repetition will be a farce. We don't know whether this repetition is a farce or the tragedy faced by Mrs. Gandhi or not, but we have at least, we are seeing, the things are being revealed, that, and people are saying that almost we are living in a time of emergency, undeclared emergency. So with all these characteristics, that is my question, that have India traveled? Did we travel our whole full circle. We complete our full circle. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your kind patience.
Thank you, Professor Shivaji Pratim Basu. Sir, one question is there. Can I put question before you? Sir? One question, sir.
Who is asking?
Dr. Orgho Shukul. He's asking that what is the role of elitism in Indian democracy?
You know, elites are there. All parties, in some parties, you know, you will find only elites. So to be in a democracy like India, if you have to be very effective, you cannot rely on the elites. So you need the support base. All parties, most of the parties are led by the elites in India. Some of the parties, barring a few, most of the parties are led by the elites, but the followers are the common people. The followers are the common people.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And I think Dr. Orgho Shukul get the answer. And thank you for your presentation, sir. You are tirelessly present and you're from your busy schedule, sir. And we are very thankful to you, sir. From the Coach Bihar College, Department of Political Science, IQC, and the Birpara College, IQC, and Department of Sociology. We are thankful to you that you are giving the precious time for this international webinar. And the participant, and we are highly benefited by your lecture, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So I have, you know, some other meetings to join. With your permission, kind permission, I don't know who was chairing my session.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Who was chairing my session? So with the kind permission of the chairperson or chairman, I ask for your leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now over to S.K. Kamaruzzaman.